at 97.5 The Fanatic. And because it is a bye week, he's back to his regular scheduled programming. That's Andrew DeCecco. Andrew, good morning, man. How are you?
Good morning, guys. Good to be with you. I'm doing well.
So I'd love for you to answer the question that Connor was just talking about as we reset the show there at the end of our Today's Headlines segment. I asked the question to start the show. Who is Jalen Hurts as a quarterback, Andrew? And the question is whether or not he could still be the guy that took the world by storm in 2022, or is it more likely that he's obviously less than that, but hopefully not a bad quarterback? So in your eyes, who is Jalen Hurts?
It's a great question, Andrew. And I can remember doing a show probably back in July when we were doing our off-season rankings, and some on our station bristled at the notion of me having Jalen Hurts ranked 9th or 10th and going into the season. But for me, there's still a lot to be learned about Jalen Hurts, right? I mean, you've seen the good, the bad, you've seen the great in 2022, but I think for me, it's probably somewhere right now around the middle of the road. Now, do I think a lot of folks maybe are overreacting a little bit to a 4-game sample size? Yeah, I do, because you have to take into account the new offense, and getting AJ and Devontae back are going to obviously give it a new outlook. But I do think that there's been the turnovers that keep surfacing, the lack of spatial awareness when you're on the field, and situational awareness that you have to be mindful of. But for me, I'm not ready to say that he's not one of the premier quarterbacks in the NFL. I still would put him probably right now about 10 to 12. I think that's fair.
Do you think Kellen Moore is off to a good start here?
Well, it's tough to grade it when you don't have Devontae for a game and you don't have AJ for 2 games, John. But
you have 3 games.
I have to tell you, being ranked, 3 games. So being ranked with just 19th in motion, I think is kind of it's kind of surprising, considering that we expected to see a ton of that coming into the season. But you have to really assess what the offense truly is when you have all the pieces in place and everyone's healthy and everything's sort of firing on all cylinders. But right now, I have to say, kind of underwhelmed with the offense. You don't see a ton of players being schemed open, getting players into space, which was a calling card for Kellen Moore going into the season, and a lot of slow developing plays, especially last week when the quarterback needed just some sort of get the ball out quick, have some early answers. And I did not think that Kellen Moore did a great job helping him out in that regard, John, but I think that it's going to look a lot different coming out of the bye week. I really do. I'm not swaying too far one way or the other right now.
Is the 19th in pre-snap motion Kellen Moore's decision, or is this the collaborative effort, Andrew, after Nick Sirianni scoffed at the media for even questioning him last year and his lack of usage in pre-snap motion?
Well, you could look at it as a collaborative effort. It could be a byproduct of not having 2 premier weapons, one of which for a few games here. But you also have to look at it, is Jalen Hurts comfortable with that? We don't know. So it's kind of hard to make those assessments without fully knowing where Eagles land on that. I still think 4 games in, Andrew, it's still a little too premature to suggest that maybe someone's a little bit more heavy-handed with the offense versus maybe the other school of thought where maybe the player's not overly infatuated with motion. We're gonna learn a lot about Eagles coming up here because they have a very favorable slate of games starting week 6 against the Browns. So if you still don't see that and you see it kind of start swaying the other direction, I think that it's fair to say that maybe someone's having a little bit more of a heavier hand in the say.
When Nick Sirianni talks about having a say in the defense, you've seen Vic Fangio, you know his history. What kind of say do you actually think he's got?
I have to say probably not a whole lot. When you have a coordinator who's been doing it for decades, he knows exactly what he wants. He knows what he's looking at. He knows the personnel and the certain situations that he's looking for. Nick Sirianni is ultimately going to get final say, John. He's the head coach. But I have to think that when you hire someone like a Vic Fangio, when you hire someone like a Kellen Moore, those coordinators get full autonomy of overseeing their respective rooms. And I have to think that Nick isn't going to get a ton of say defensively. So I think for me, it's solely on Vic Fangio and calling his defense. And to be fair for Vic, he's kind of in a bind, guys, because he doesn't have a ton of – in order for him to run his system in the way that it's supposed to go, you have to have some sort of a pass rush. And your hands are sort of tied when your pass rush isn't able to get home and you're playing off coverage and teams are able to pick you apart like that. So he's going to have to find a way to scheme around that and find ways to adapt to his personnel. But it's solely going to be Vic making those calls, I would imagine.
We're speaking to Andrew DeCecco on the Comcast Business Hotline. Andrew, we've been getting into conversations. We talked about this a lot yesterday about statement wins and style points, especially against lesser teams like the Cleveland Browns and New York Giants. I first want you to answer this question. Do those things matter to you when your team is struggling with high expectations? But then the follow-up question to that, if the Commanders beat the Browns this weekend by 2 or 3 scores and the Eagles squeak by with a field goal victory, does that change your opinion? Would love for you to talk about both.
That's a great question, Andrew. So style points for me don't really – I mean, it doesn't really have any effect one way or the other. You'd want to see how the team wins or loses and in what fashion. Are there certain areas that continue to surface? Are there same blemishes coming to fruition that they're not able to correct? If so, then that's something that we need to have a discussion about, and that's a troubling trend. But if the Eagles aren't able to – I like your scenario here. So if the Commanders win in commanding fashion over the Browns, and the Eagles aren't able to get by with a pretty significant lead there, I mean, I think that offers some cause for concern. But I would also say that every week is different, every scenario is different, and circumstances are different.
Spoken like a true football guy.
Yeah. What you want to see from the Eagles is you want to see, Andrew, you want to see them get out to faster starts, right? Because slow starts have plagued this team through the first 4 weeks. You want to see them protect the football. That, to me, is really what that's all you can really assess. And you want to see them making those improvements throughout the bye week and eliminating some of those errors that continue to plague this team.
Donovan McNabb is driving a car, okay, and Ron Jaworski's next to him, and then you've got Carson Wentz is in the back seat too, and they're standing there, and then they're just listening to sports talk radio, and all the defenses of Jalen Hurts. And all the excuse making for Jalen Hurts. What do you think they think? Because you've seen, you know what it was like for quarterbacks in this town.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think they think about it? And why is it happening?
Blatant disrespect. If I'm them and I'm listening to the defenders for Jalen, considering that everything that they did was often scrutinized and looked at under the microscope, they have to be sort of puzzled. And I think a lot of that, John, has to do with today's NFL. And back then, it just seemed like everything. A lot of folks were tougher on the quarterbacks, and everything that they did was sort of looked at under the microscope. So I think right now what you're seeing, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I don't think that it's fair, but in many regards, you're seeing Jalen Hurts being held to different standards than the quarterbacks of the previous Eagles eras. And I don't think that's fair, because if you're going to hold one player to a certain level of accountability, I think you certainly have to look at Jalen Hurts and hold him to that same level.
All right, last thing for you, Andrew, because I do want to get a positive in here as well. But through the first 4 weeks, what is something that Andrew DeCecco has loved so far, that you feel confident in this team? But then what also have you seen through 4 weeks where you go, that's something that they definitely need to overcome or they're in trouble?
The running game, Andrew. I would say the running game is as advertised. And it sounds simple enough, but going to the season, not everybody was sold on Saquon. Even me, I had some trepidation. I didn't know if he was going to be a seamless fit, if they were going to try and shoehorn him into the offense, if he was going to be the same player at 27 years old, because he does have a lot of mileage on him. But I think that he's bailed the Eagles out of a lot of tough spots. He's helped the offensive line when they've been banged up of late, and he's found ways to, late in the games, put the Eagles in prime position to win football games, say it's the Falcons game. But me, I think that's something that they should be able to hang their hat on, especially when things maybe aren't going their way offensively. You have a good running game you can lean on. Me, on the other side of things, tackling issues. The tackling issues, which is something that players have done their entire life, and you're not able to do that right now, week 4 into the season, and you don't have live tackling drills throughout the season. To me, I think that's something that's probably going to continue to repeat itself throughout the year, because I just don't know what you can do to remedy that.
And when the coach says that starts with me, we got to put him in a better honestly, like I'll be the first one to rip Nick Sirianni. I can't rip him for Avonte Maddox completely whiffing.
Not at all.
Yeah, I can't blame him. I saw a play of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, by the way. Somebody posted the all-22 of it when the Buccaneers were in the red zone, and he turned his back. Like, he didn't even try to make contact. Like, I can't blame Sirianni for that.
He throws his arm out a lot.
Yeah. Like, I can't blame Sirianni for that.
Exactly, and that's exactly it. You know, there's certain instances there that players have to go out there and execute as well. So, I mean, you could blame Nick Sirianni all you want, and he does have a prominent piece into the way that the season has gone so far. He's the head coach. Everything starts and ends with him. On the field, I mean, when you're looking at some of those tackling efforts and things like that, look, teams are going to continue to put players in space because the Eagles aren't going to be able to generate a consistent pass rush, which forces the defensive backs and the linebackers to come up and make tackles in space. And we haven't seen players take great angles, and as a result, you're seeing a lot of these plays that are short passes turn into explosive plays because of the tackling efforts.
Andrew, you're the man. We